first, I started my career with Muppets when, right out of basically, out of uni, I taught in a daycare center. I was born.
Not too far back.
I taught in a daycare center in California, and there was one day when Sesame Street, which was just new at that time, came on the air, and I was one of the teachers that was supposed to be sweeping the floor while we were waiting for the parents of the kids to arrive, right? And I thought I'll just turn on the TV and see what's on. And it was Sesame Street, and soon my sweeping was. I'd never seen anything like it. And I decided in that minute I was going to go to New York, and because I thought they're doing for 9 million kids what we're trying to do for 30. So I went to New York. I could go on and on about how I got the job there, but I eventually got a job as a secretary at the Children's Television Workshop. And then through that, I was on the Sesame Street magazine, and in those days, Jim Henson himself blue-lined every drawing of a Muppet in the magazine. So in the old days, when you had mechanicals, they had to be schlepped across town, so he'd make little tweaks to the iris essence checking, which is one of the main secrets to his great success. And just tweak Ernie's eyes or Bert's this nose or whatever. And then we take these back, and the artist would be corrected, etc. Okay, so that wasn't my job. My job, I was just, a secretary or whatever, or assistant. But one day, the managing editor, whose job was to go to take the mechanicals to Jim, she's a beautiful girl, her name was Brenda, beautiful hair, and she was always done up really well. And this day it was pissing with rain in New York, and you had to go across town, take 2 buses, blah, blah, blah. And she said, "Oh, I just can't be asked to go." And I went, "I'll go," because I hadn't met Jim Henson. I mean, why wouldn't you go? And so I schlepped across, they're big. It was like it was a 34-page magazine, and I schlepped it across town. It was bell-bottoms in those days, and they had the water wicked up to about here. And I got to the Henson offices, soaking wet, except the mechanicals were all been protected, obviously. And I was told to go upstairs to where Jim was. And it was a big wooden doors that opened onto his office. Did you ever go to that building? Yeah. And these doors opened, and there he was. And that was the first time I met him, and I just liked him immediately. And this was before the Muppet Show. So the Muppet Show, this all relates to the question.
Oh, I know it relates to the question.
The Muppet Show was where they were focusing on the Muppet Show and doing an adult puppet show. And I was like, no, you can't abandon kids. That's the most important audience. So I kept at Jim all the time. Hey, what's your kids show going to be? What's your kid? And he was much more open to it. Frank really didn't want to do kids stuff. I mean, they wanted the Muppets to really be more for adults. But how I got in Fraggle Rock. Okay, so Jim. Really, this is such a...
I'll remind you of the question every half hour, don't worry.
Okay, so I met Jim for blah, blah, blah. And so then it turns out I get married and I move to the UK, and they're doing... I get married to Scotland.
Excuse me, you moved to Scotland.
Yeah, I lived in London,
yes, but then
and Wales, and then we moved to Scotland. Jim said, would you want to come work with us? I was in the publishing group at the Children's Television Workshop, and he said, do you want to work on our publishing group? And I said, what am I going to say? No, actually I said, yeah, but I'm not going to live in London, so I don't need it, He said, this genius of this boss, he said, I don't care where you live, as long as you get the job done. So what that immediately does is it means you put your life on hold to make sure you get that job done. And he was godfather to my first child. This relates to Fraggle Rock, because also another member of the family was a man called Peter Orton. Peter Orton set up a company called HIT. But he worked at Sesame Street, and what he said to me, I've got an idea for Jim. Please sit me next to him at the party before the christening, and at the dinner before the christening. I said, okay. And basically he said, Jim, you are in a position with
this great success of the Muppet Show to do an international kids show. You are the only person on the planet who could pull this off. So Jim, you say something like that to Jim and it's like, I'm there. But what does he do? He thinks, international kids show. We could do a show that would help stop war. Let's do that, because we'll be reaching kids all over the world. That's the extra kind of Jim Henson thinking. And since it happened at the christening that was of my son, he had to ask me to work on the show. So that's
obvious, really.
Sorry, it was a long, but it was, there's all sorts of reasons these things, ways that these things happen. Something you never, if I figured out how to do it, I never would have been able to do it. So it just happened like that. And then he wanted Fraggle Rock to be something he didn't have to do all the time, because he was focusing on movies and grown-up stuff. So he put his 18 puppeteers on. He put Jerry Jewell, creative mentor, big time, who had been the head writer on the Muppet Show. He put him in to head write Fraggle Rock. I mean, you gave me credit that I don't deserve. Fraggle Rock was this gigantic collaboration that I just feel lucky to have been in the right place at the right time. Also, I did niggle Jim about doing kids, staying in the kid, doing things for kids. So that's how that. Was that too long? Sorry.
No, that was absolutely perfect. I'll just sit here and listen. And I'll probably just sit here and listen to Louise as well.
Tears,
well, Louise, I said much earlier today, Louise is my hero. Hero because I can think of very few people who are quite as talented as Louise.
I can think of a few.
Well, there is some big American stars in there. But Louise...
Okay, you're taking it back now.
Acts, sings, puppets. I mean, you weren't just Annie Sue Pig, you were also the Queen. So, how did you get into being all the things that you are?
Well, so much of it, I don't want to say it's luck, because that says I didn't do anything, and I have worked quite hard to do these things. But it's taking the advantages, the harder you work, the luckier you get. But the fact of, I went to a stage school, arts educational, singing and dancing. I always wanted to act and sing. And by pure chance, I got an audition for the Muppet Show because I was tall. And I wouldn't be a puppeteer if I wasn't tall, because Jim was tall, Frank was tall. The sets were built so they could stand up. If Jim had been short, I wouldn't be a puppeteer.
I might have been.
You would have. And I might have created Fraggle Rock. You never know. So, by some fluke, I was in the right place at the right time and took that opportunity. And all the time when I was doing the Muppet Show, I was thinking, but really I'm an actress, really I should be doing the other things. But I loved working with Jim. I watched him and Frank, as you saw, they were the most wonderful double act. Frank is a genius, and seeing them working together every day, I thought, I am not worthy. These people have something special. But I learnt so much. Then I went off and did the things I'd always intended to do. But I've been so lucky to come back. I've done many projects with Jocelyn. And now to come back again, I did the Furchester Hotel with CBeebies and Sesame Street, and just recently the Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, and I cannot believe how lucky I am that I've just been doing Fiddler on the Roof in the West End. I feel like it's just, I love it. I'm so lucky to be working. The best thing is to be working with talented people. Warwick, who is a lot younger, but kind of dragged me back into puppeteering screaming. To work with all these people, it's just joyous. And to work with people who have joy. That was the thing I learned from Jim. His joy in what he did and in other people's talent. And if I have anything that I can take for that, I try and remember that in any job I do, to bring Jim's joy and the thing that he taught me, and that was one of my very early jobs.
Just had to say in relation to that, he would look at a tape, maybe, I don't know if you've heard the story, he would watch, a playback of something that that everybody had just done, and you'd go, that's so stupid, it's worthy of us.
It's a good time. So, but if I can just contradict, you weren't lucky, you are talented. And we make our own luck, but luck is something that comes through hard work and talent.
Yeah, it is. But, you know, the fact of being
in the right place,
in the right place.
Yeah.
And yes, I took those opportunities and tour. And, you know, when I got the audition for Jim, I was on tour with a show called Land of the Dinosaurs. And my luck there was I was working with a director called Ken Hill, who had worked with Joan Littlewood. Do people know who Joan of Stratford East? And the way she worked, she had to throw things up in the air. My agent said, you have an audition for this show. It's on a Saturday afternoon. I said, I have a matinee. We don't have any understudies. I cannot go. She said, well, you have to ask. And I asked the director, and because he'd worked with Joan Littlewood, he said, yeah, we'll improvise it. Your sister will take your lines. But if I hadn't been in that show, I might not have been able to go to that audition, you know.
But life is full of if I hadn't. Unfortunately, we're full of we have. So if you could pass the microphone now to the gentleman at the end there. Now, can you tell me how you got to Sesame Street?
Yes. Take the M or the R train from Manhattan to Queens. These are the facts. Now, well, I got to Sesame Street by these people, really, because I'm a massive fan of Fraggle Rock and the Muppet Show. They're my favourite shows. So I'd like to be sat here listening to you guys talk about it all day long. So I was a fan, and I was at home watching the work that these guys had created and just trying to replicate it at home on the TV and stuff. So I had that, like, this is what I need to do, and I'm going to make it there. And I bugged Louise and Jocelyn over the years. And just kind of, you know, I was self-taught, so I had a monitor, a TV, and we hooked our home video camera up to the TV, and I just practiced. So when an audition did come up, I was kind of ready. I'd learned all the good stuff from watching all the shows they had made.
But you don't just go from operating something in front of a closed-circuit TV in your bedroom to Sesame Street.
No.
Yeah, but a lot of the puppeteers, that is how they started. I had no idea what I was going into, but all the younger puppeteers are self-taught, they've got a monitor, that's what they do.
But this is the equivalent of what I did when I was a kid, which was I built a radio studio in my attic, and that was how I taught myself. And actually, if you really want to craft, you can teach yourself.
But the way I did get to Sesame Street is by working on the Furchester Hotel with Louise, and we had characters, Gonger was a chef and Cookie Monster, they were kind of a double act, and they worked so well that I pitched a show to Sesame, and they picked up that segment, that show.
There's an awful lot of crossover in all the things that either Jim Henson created or were influenced by Jim or consequential to Jim's influence. There's a lot of crossover. We saw that Muppet show earlier where the Sesame Street characters came on it, and there's the crossover between Sesame Street and Furchester, and it's a nice thing, and I think it's a nice thing because in the real world, people are not living in an isolated bubble, and it's always troubled me, for example, that when you watch somebody in EastEnders in their living room, they're not watching Coronation Street. It's just kind of strange.
And those guys are a family. The Fraggles and the Sesame Street gang and the Muppets,
Well, that's kind of the next thing I was going to touch on, because the three of you are part of the one family. And actually, you all are part of the great family of puppeteers, which is a kind of an extended family. Back to you for a second, Jocelyn. I want to ask you something about your subsequent career. We're not going to go into the whole thing because we haven't got time. And if anybody wants to, they can Google you. That's the great thing about the internet nowadays. But you have, in fact, you've worked with various television series over the years, but you have done a lot of puppet stuff, and I think perhaps Jocelyn has been branded very much a television person. It's not entirely so, because we worked together on stage puppets, and you and my wife worked together on stage show with people. But there is something magical about being able to invent puppet characters. What is it that's different about doing that to just creating characters for a drama, for human characters? What's the difference?
Well, a puppet character can grow 2 heads. That's always useful for
People
certain stories you
that,
might want to tell. It just gives you just more scope and more in the kinds of stories you can tell. But you have to be sure that you never want somebody, when you're doing something for puppets or even animation, which has different requirements, you don't want somebody to say to you, well, why can't this just be live action? That's the test you always have to do yourself when you've written a script. Well, this could be live action. Start again. It needs to be puppets. But I particularly like, I worked with Ivor Wood for a while on the Charlie Chalk. Ivor Wood that was my first stop motion. It was my first stop motion experience, and I loved that. Except that the thing about working with these guys is you're on the floor. You're part of the whole. When you're doing animation or stop motion, you're done once you've written the thing. You're not there helping if the blocking doesn't work and changing line. Another Jim Henson story of Fraggle Rock. He was directing. It was one of I can't remember what show it was, but he was directing, and it was in the days when the mics were still all hooked up with wires, and the puppeteer and the way the thing was blocking it was the puppeteers were all completely tied up in their wires, and Jim said, "This isn't working, you're going to have to rewrite it. You're going to have to rewrite it." And I went, "Okay." And I stood there, and he went, "Now?" That was when I really learned working in that situation, is boom, I can rewrite like that. That was a very good skill to get, but you don't get that with, that's the thing with puppets, is you get, and who was saying about, was it Nigel? I can't remember, who was saying about that the writers would watch the puppeteers between takes? That was always my favorite thing to do. Because you'd see other relationships between the puppets that you might not have seen or you wouldn't have thought to write, and you bring all that in. It's this great, fantastic creative stuff.
But of course the puppets are dynamic. They really do interact with you. The puppeteers interact with the puppet and
that's what's I
so
love
that.
that. I wish we could do more puppet stuff.
I was actually going to mention some of the things that you've done, but it runs to 6 lines and we really don't have time for all that. But of all the things you've done, what have you enjoyed the most?
Fraggle Rock.
Fraggle Rock.
I also really loved the Magic School Bus.
They've got bored.
I've done this to people before.
It's the Russell Harty thing, Frank Oz, this is boring.
No, it's not boring. We just getting started. Hi, Jocelyn. My name's Jocelyn.
Have you ever been to the Furchester Hotel?
No, you've never asked me.
I am Vanilla Furchester. I run the Furchester Hotel, and I welcome you all with furry arms. Please come and stay with us.
Applause, applause. What's up with you?
That works in the kitchen, but he's done so well.
No, but I hit the big time. I'm here on Sesame Street. I don't need your hotel anymore. See ya, baby.
I have to tell you, this is what the guests at my hotel had to endure at breakfast this morning. With Gonger and Fenella.
Oh, Gonger, you don't mean that, do you?
This is Mama. I love Mama. That's just
We love it.
Yes, I do.
Yes, and
Thanks for letting us come.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming along. And I have agreed the bus fare with you, which I'll give to Fenella.
Yeah, we travel cheap, but we just travel in a box.
Well, that's the great thing about puppets, isn't it? Because, let's face it, puppets are cheap.
Yeah.
Puppeteers aren't, though.
You remember that.
I was coming to that bit. You've done all these different puppets for these, and you've had the opportunity to be a Muppeteer, the only British Muppeteer on the original Muppet show, weren't you?
Well, we had Mike Quinn came in and did a little bit, but I was the main.
Yeah. Do you have a favourite character? Because you've done so many characters, and you've done Spitting Image, and do you have in the back of your mind, is there one character that's you, or that you're very fond of above them all?
Well, the thing with the Muppet characters, which I only realised very recently, is, of course, they're all aspects of our soul.
Yes.
It's a split, and my character on the Muppet Show was Annie Sue Pigg, and she was very young, and she was wanting to be a star, and she was terribly keen and eager, and of course that was me at 20. And, you know, Fenella is also me. It's all, and the Gourmand Skexus is also me. It's all me, and they're all, that's where we're so lucky, because we can bring all the bad bits, and that kind of Jim, you know, with the dark crystal, the split of the Skexus and the mystics, of the thing of people's souls. We have all the good, we have all the bad, we have all the average, and that's what we do.
I just want to say that I'm nothing like this guy.
He is. Well, I would see Jim, you know, Jim who seemed to be this calm, placid guy, and then he would put on these characters, and his mad side came out with the characters. You know, you saw the naughty, the anarchic from this man who seemed like he wouldn't say boo to a goose, but he would, and he did with his puppets.
Do you find that, I mean, most actors act roles because they can behave in a way that they couldn't when they're being themselves. So do you find that the freedom of being a puppet allows you to do all sorts of things that you would never dream of saying, thinking or doing?
Well, the one time that happened, we did a royal variety show, and I bought a very nice outfit, and then at the last minute David Laser, the producer, said, "I'm really sorry, Louise, you're not going to be in the lineup, you'll be in your monster costume as Big Mama," and I was Big Mama, and Prince Charles was walking along the line, and he said, "Oh, are there any women in the Muppets?" I'm afraid I leapt forward as Big Mama and grabbed him and went, "Prince, Prince, Prince." I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't been in a monster costume.
I'm not entirely sure that Harry Corbett would have hit the Queen with a water pistol either, if he hadn't been City. What about you, Warren? Have you ever done something?
Well, I mean,
Perhaps not quite as extreme as a
No,
time.
I mean, that's, you can be locked up for that kind of thing. No, but like, you just get the opportunity to be like a piece of cheese, a singing cow, a monster chef. Like, you can be a different thing every single day. And as an actor, I'd never be able to do that. I'm me, I look like me, so unless I got a panto cow outfit, like, you can just kind of be everything. It's open to whatever your imagination.
Can I ask you the same question I asked Louise then? Have you got a favourite puppet?
I like this guy.
Yeah, he likes me because I make a lot of money for him.
No, I like this guy because, well, he's new and he's completely me actually. Like when I first saw the puppet, I thought, I don't know what you think guys, but when I first saw this puppet I was like, wow, that looks like a puppet that Jim would do.
Yes.
It looks like a 60s kind of Ed Sullivan show.
Very good.
So I was drawn to it straight away. And it kind of, oh, it's me. Just a high-end version.
I'm intrigued by the amount of expression that you can create in an inanimate piece of fluff. The one that always astounded me was the amount of expression that Shelley Lewis got into Blanchard. But how do you do that? How do you actually make these inanimate creatures take life?
Well, actually,
what is the secret?
They don't do anything. These do two things: mouth open, mouth closed. They don't do a lot, but
well, that's all Oscar Puffin could do was
exactly.
that.
We spend our time trying to you know, really, it's like learning an instrument. We kind of know exactly how to, you know, they look down slightly, they're kind of sad now. Oh, look, they're thoughtful, they're looking up into the sky. It's the dance between the camera and the puppets, I think. Louise can say much more about this than I can.
No, I was just aware watching when Jim and Frank were playing, and I always loved Fozzie Bear. And Fozzie is very like Fenella.
Yes.
Doesn't do very much, but the emotion of Fozzie when he thought he might be sacked, and you see this, there's nothing he can do, but you see it's desperate because he might lose his job, and you get that, and that's...
Wake up! This is very interesting!
Boring!
your hair on first?
Gonger, shut it.
I said, sorry.
When you're
I
writing,
was being serious then.
when you're writing for puppets, how do you write in all this stuff? You don't.
You hope to give them enough context that it creates a character that then they can just build on. It's so much fun. And then you see the things that they do and you write that in.
But one of the things that happens is sometimes you get given a character and you put it on and you try and find a voice in this kind of puppets. And sometimes it doesn't work because Miss Piggy notoriously was not Frank originally, and Richard Hunt did Miss Piggy and it was okay, and then Frank took it on and made her a star. Gonger wasn't Warwick initially, and Gonger is now a star. But sometimes the puppet doesn't fit the puppeteer, and you find it.
But what happens when a puppeteer has to take over an established character that is working? Is that really difficult?
Yes.
So we just did Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, and I do the Chamberlain, which was Frank Oz's character. Like, we all know Frank Oz is the genius of puppetry. So you kind of, for that, you just really...
Yes, this is really interesting.
That's very... Oh, no.
Don't back off, Lottie. Oh, you were trying to be serious.
This is like my dreams. Where was I?
You were taking over Frank Oz's character.
Yeah, so like you have to go to school, you study, you watch all the stuff, you try and learn about the characters, you need to know inside out what they would do, and you just try and kind of carry on that legacy, I suppose, as it were.
But it is tougher. It is tougher.
Very tough because you have to stay within those boundaries of what came before, and then like you over time you bring new stuff to it. Is that right, Louise?
Yeah, that is right, but it's also, you can't be tied in knots. You know, one of the things about Frank was how free he was and how anarchic, I use that word again, and it's hard taking over from someone like that. It's impossible because it was Frank, he's a genius. But Warwick's done an amazing job on the Chamberlain and brought his own life to it and carried it on and done fantastically.
It's nothing like this.
The voices. Now, actually, could you just explain, because there is an assumption being made here that everybody in this room understands totally how Fraggle Rock, to take a specific example, is shot, is made, physically made. Now, Fraggle Rock, you've got the set at a certain level, and you've got the puppeteers underneath the set looking on TV monitors, which were backwards, weren't they? The monitors that...
No, the Muppet way, which I think is the correct way, new young puppeteers work with reverse scan monitors.
Yeah.
The Muppets, we see exactly as it will be broadcast, so we're able to direct ourselves. We're seeing the picture as it will go out.
But it has to be pointed out,
So it's not a mirror image.
if any of you have ever looked in a television monitor and tried to comb your hair, it's very difficult because you're actually looking at it going in the opposite direction to where you think it's going. It took me 8 years to learn how to comb my hair on a television monitor, and then I lost it all. You're underneath, and you are doing the voices live, right?
Yeah, so we're working. Oops.
This is specifically Muppets.
This is specifically Muppets, but
So we're
Muppets
working like this.
are such a great influence now that you really...
And so because my guy has to be shorter than Vanilla, I'm probably working like this actually. And we have headbands on our hats with our mics clipped to our heads.
And now they are able to be wireless. It was in the old days on Muppet Show, we had cables, so we'd do a shot, and the backstage shot specifically, we'd have to walk across, and then we'd all have to untangle at the end of a take. We'd all be going, oh no, wires. And okay. Now we have wireless, so that's much easier.
And we're also watching monitors that are on the floor, all around us. So every puppeteer has a monitor. And if you need to go over here, there's a whole stack of monitors over here. And there's a whole stack of monitors over here. Wherever you turn, you need to see what the camera's seeing, otherwise you just can't guarantee the puppet's going to look good.
Because you can't look up and see what it is you're actually...
Well, it doesn't make any sense to look up, because what's only important is what the camera's seeing.
And also, if you're providing the voices live, then obviously you've got the great advantage that you can make them, you can lip sync it because you are syncing with what you know your brain's going to say. Have you also worked where you've had to lip sync your character to a pre-recorded track?
Yeah, the Muppets do the songs are pre-recorded, but on Spitting Image, when I started, I was doing the Queen, and I would sometimes do her voice live, but the puppets were just too big, and they wanted people who did impressions, so getting impressionists who could puppeteer. They trained, Chris Barry was one who was an impressionist, and trained in Stephen Allen as well. But it was just technically, the puppets were right over and the microphones, it just really wasn't practical. So we were usually doing it to a pre-recorded track.
Right. You did the Queen's voice, did you?
Yes, in the beginning.
Okay,
Yeah.
do it. Just do it.
That's really difficult because I'm vanilla. I can't do it when I'm vanilla.
How much brain thing does it take to switch between characters?
I've had to do it on Furchester. I was Fanilla's grandma. Was it grandma? And I was playing scenes with them, and I loved it. It is a switch, but I really enjoyed doing it.
If you've got a mildly schizophrenic mind.
I'm very schizophrenic, whatever the word is.
Yes, Pussycat William. You all know about Pussycat William, don't you?
That sounds disgusting.
But and you all know that the operator, we saw the clip there, but you know all the lady who did Pussycat William was very fond of a little sherry every 3 minutes. And I think that in many ways was what gave Pussycat William her character, or his character. Yeah, it was a bit kind of strange. Jocelyn, you have, you huge long career, and modest to a fault. There's something faulty with her modesty. Who would you say, I think I know the answer to this, but I think it's worth asking. Who today do you admire in the field of children's television for originality? For creativity,
Somebody looking now.
Yes, for talent. Well, who is it today who's the Jocelyn Stevenson of tomorrow?
There's that. No. Not because there isn't. There's so many people that are brilliant. I have a lot of time for Ann Wood and Andy Davenport. I think, and it wasn't, and also for the Ashley Baker Davies, the Peppa Pig guys. It's the people that I just. And it helps that I now have a granddaughter that I've been watching these things with and a whole new appreciation for what they do. Teletubbies, when I first saw Teletubbies, I didn't have I screamed. I thought it was so weird, the stuff in the stomach and all that. And then started watching it with my granddaughter and just thought, And then, and In the Night Garden, I just thought In the Night Garden was
In the Night Garden was fun. Actually, I have to tell you, we don't anymore transmit these things, because they've all gone over to children's channels, which I think is a terrible shame. I think children's television being isolated in a ghetto of its own is a mistake. But we used to transmit these, and my colleagues and I would all look forward to that little moment of the day when we put out In the Night Garden. And we would turn the control room, this is true, we'd turn the control room lights off and we'd jam the door shut and we'd just enjoy In the Night Garden. All of us did, and we were all grown-up people, you know. But it's the magic of vanilla. I can see your tonsils. You're going to do something together, I gather. No, I don't. Shall I rephrase that?
Yes, I think you should. Definitely.
Townley, what do you want?
Well, I was told that you were going to do a song. Is this?
Yes, we're going to change.
Is my information correct?
Yes, we're going to change.
We're going to try our best to do a song.
Are you going to change?
Yes, we're going to change.
Right.
Come on,
you go
dear.
off and change. What?
they're performing.
They're going to perform, but it will
I'm
take.
behind the scenes.
It will take. You know,
2 minutes.
Jocelyn says she's not a behind the scenes person.
Yes, I am a behind the scenes person, so I get off. while they...
So you get off. Have you never actually wanted to be a puppeteer? Have you ever thought,
Too
oh,
hard.
I'd love to do
Too hard,
that?
too hard. I don't like performing. I have performance anxiety, and puppeteering is way too hard.
And have you ever done a cameo in one of your own series?
No.
You're not.
Why would
You're
I
not
do
like
that?
Well, because there are. I know a lot of people who do. A lot of people who have that itch to get just in front of the camera for a moment in something that they're working on to kind of brand it.
I'll just take nice credit that goes up on this.
You take the credit, okay. I will say thank you, Jocelyn
Thank you.
Stevenson.
Enjoy it thoroughly.
Please thank you.